All right, in this video, we're going to help you avoid growing broke. If you're an established business, if you're an employer, and you're doing well in these crazy COVID times, the problem with doing well is that growth sucks cash, it creates complexity, it can also suck you into the business, which means you lose perspective on the most important things that you really should be focusing on. The short-term success can make it look like you're doing the right thing, and yet the vast majority of businesses that are doing well could be doing so much better if they just avoided these 3 mistakes that I'm going to go through in this video to make sure you don't grow broke. Let's do it. This is the ASX 200, right? These are all green. These are all businesses that are rocking right now. Churchill said, never waste a good crisis, right? Crisis creates problems, problems create opportunities. Entrepreneurs are all for opportunities. This is a great time, but if you're doing well, you've got to ask yourself, is it because you're lucky? Because you're in like video conferencing or crisis management or like mask making? Or are your business fundamentals really solid? My first business went from millions to zero in the GFC because we didn't get the fundamentals right. You may have heard of Nassim Taleb's great book, Antifragile. It's worth mentioning here because he observed that something is fragile when it breaks under stress. He noticed that there wasn't a word for its opposite, a word that describes something that gets stronger under stress. So he coined the concept anti-fragile. And in hindsight, there were 3 telltale signs that I was building a fragile business. I'm going to show them to you. But before we see if you've got the same 3 things, let me just give you some numbers. There are 2.3 million businesses in Australia. And look, the percentages are the same throughout the UK, the USA, Singapore. A quarter of all businesses are nano businesses, less than 50,000 a year in revenue. 3 out of 5 had revenues of less than 200,000. I mean, these aren't businesses, they're hobbies and jobs. Only a third have turnover somewhere between 200,000 and 2 million. Only a third. But even those businesses have really high failure rates because of these same 3 problems that we had, and I want to make sure that you don't have. The first is they're labor intensive. They are highly reliant on the founder's time and involvement. The second is that they are location based, so they're highly constrained by geographic factors. And the third is that they have a lot of competition. There's a wide variety of alternatives to their offer. So my first business was growing, we had team, we had revenue, we could fool ourselves into thinking we were successful, but the reality was we were fragile. Eventually something happens. For us, it was the economy that broke us. For my mate JP, he got hit by a bus when he was riding a bike. And that brings us to the first problem that we got to solve, being too labor intensive and founder reliant. So like I said, a bit over a year ago, a buddy of mine got hit while he was riding his bike. It put him in hospital for 9 months. Now, fortunately, he had a business that could handle it, but do you? If today was the last day that you could work, how long would your business survive without you? For real. Because the wealthy don't use their time to make money. They either build or acquire assets like shares or property or business. They own things that create value and money independent of their time. So there's a spectrum. Just remember this. The wealthy earn a return on assets. The poor earn a return on labor. And the question is just, where is your business on that spectrum? A good metric is revenue per full-time employee. Now, most businesses tend to become more inefficient as they grow. They stay in the red struggle zone because it's much easier to grow your team than it is to grow your revenue, right? If you're generating $1 million in revenue, but you've got a team of 10, that sucks. Your revenue is 100,000 per employee. That means a lot of people are required to produce the result. Lots of people, lots of points of failure, lots of inconsistency, lots of headaches. But if you're generating $1 million in revenue with only 4 on the team, that's solid. Revenue per employee is $250,000, which means you're leveraging better assets. You might be leveraging media assets or technology or better systems, which means more output for the same input. Now, one of the keys from my experience in building an anti-fragile business is to switch from a labor-driven business to an asset-driven business. And look, I go into more detail at my workshop, but the second factor is being location-based. So here's the question. How many markets right now can you sell into? Let's assume the value you offer is awesome, but if you can only deliver it locally, then that's a huge constraint. Blockbuster was constrained by geography. Netflix was not. And this is why most small business owners stay small. There's 25 million people in Australia, but there's 8 billion people on the planet. If you're not thinking beyond your borders, you're not thinking. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I do mean to challenge you. Like Gabriella, she's one of our alumni. She's a naturopath. She was constrained by how far people would drive to her physical practice. Now, she runs a highly successful global online clinic with tens of thousands of clients from around the world. She's a best-selling author. She's just finished a research project with Harvard. Her skill set didn't change. She just changed the way that her value was delivered. A real estate agent or an engineer that thinks they're restricted by their location, they're right. The same real estate agent or engineer, though, that decides they have value to offer a global market are also right. It's just about how. The third problem that you need to solve is the competition problem. It used to be that, there'd only be one butcher, baker, or candlestick maker per town. But now a new business starts every 100 seconds. Being good at what you do isn't enough, right? Somehow you need to differentiate. You need to stand out from the crowd. And in this workshop, we talk about the income curve, where being good at what you do will yield a low income. To move up to a high income, you just need to be good at what you do and be well known for it. So what's my point? My point is that it's predictable that your business isn't close to its potential. It's predictable that you're the bottleneck. It's predictable that you think there are a bunch of special factors unique to your situation. So it's good to know that it's also highly predictable that the problems you're experiencing are way more common than you think. It's also good to know that the problems you're struggling with are way easier to solve than you think. There's a blueprint. A little over a century ago, flight, for the most part, was a mystery. Now you can download blueprints for how to build your own rockets with your kids. Right? At Dent, we've been acquiring best practice and templates and processes that solve some of the most common problems small business owners have for a decade. There's a process for developing high performance assets that drive your revenue per employee. There's a process for developing digital global products starting off from a local service business. There's a process for positioning yourself as the go-to brand in your industry. So if I can please ask, stop putting so much time into solving problems that have already been solved. I believe there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. I believe it's the role of every entrepreneur to act as a force for good in the world, and we live in crazy times. We need you at your best. So join me and a bunch of entrepreneurs as I share what I've learned building my own business, as well as examples from our alumni to be able to help you stand out, to be able to help you scale up, to be able to help you make a dent in the universe. Cheers.